Go, NTDO 212, com check.
DPS, go. Inco, go. PUS, go. Surgeon, go. Booster, go. Copy that. We have a go from you guys.
This is Talking Sound.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Talking Sound podcast, the only podcast on the internet where negative 10 is a number to be desired. Coming at you live once again from the throbbing heart of rock and roll, that is Austin, Texas. I am Chris Jordan, your host. And today on the podcast, we're actually going to talk about a really deep and harsh subject. We talk a lot on this show about the art that is audio engineering. We talk a lot about the effort, the love that goes into it. And we also talk about being paid properly for the services that you render. Remember, this is my corner and this is how much it costs to play here. That's kind of the attitude that you have to have. I had a really good friend of mine recently who explained the fact that his theory behind payment is that he should be getting paid minimum wage plus $1 for every year he's been doing it. And I think that's pretty fair. That's actually a really good way to look at it. The real issue comes in not necessarily with, how much you charge or anything else, but especially as a freelancer, whenever you're working for someone or for a company or on a salaried position, you can be pretty guaranteed that check's going to come in and that it's going to cash. Whenever you're a freelancer, it's a little bit different story. Until you've had a working relationship with people, it can be hard. It can be very hard to trust that. And, what do you do? What do you do when people are unresponsive? I've actually had a couple people contact me via the app over in the right-hand corner widget, the Call Us app, for questions and technical help, things like that. And their question was, I've got a client who I went out and did work for, and I've yet to be able to be paid. Now, there are a few things that you can do to kind of abate this from happening. A lot of it comes in how you approach the situation from the beginning. Are you approaching the situation as a professional? Are you approaching the situation as, I'm not going to say amateur here, but on a lower level of professionalism? Where did you get the client from? Where did you get the contact from? Was it a friend? Was it a friend of a friend? Was it somebody saying, hey, my buddy needs a sound guy for the night? Were you responding to a Craigslist ad? There are a lot of things that come into play. Really, to start off with, and I've been through this situation a few times. I've had to take a few people to small claims court to get paid, things like that. And it's hard. It's hard, as freelancers, until you have a really good network, until you have a really good safety net of people that you can call on for regular work, things like that, just kind of, as I've said before, throw a couple lines in the water, see what bites. And, normally once you've got a good bed of people that you can call on, you have a fairly decent to midland chance of getting gigs on the regular. Aside from that, it can be really hard. It can be very hard to find gigs regularly, until you do land that house position, if that's what you're looking for. You would think that it's a certain type of clientele that doesn't pay, but that's not necessarily true. In my time, I have contracted with churches, I've contracted with individuals, bands, clubs, all kinds of folk. And it runs the gamut, everybody. It runs the spectrum. I've had churches ask me to reserve Christmas Eve for them. And then 5 days before Christmas Eve, cancel the gig entirely. It's like, I could have had I could have been shopping for much larger gigs, but I had held my services for somebody, so I didn't. So it's hard. It's hard, what happens when that comes about. And I said earlier, there's a way to abate some of that, and some of it comes in how you approach the situation from the beginning, of course. Try and contact everything via email. Try and do as much stuff through writing as possible. The more email contact you have, the better. Of course, I prefer talking with people on the phone. I prefer voice communication. I find very little gets miscommunicated that way. But up to a point, once we're talking money, figures, details, I'll gladly detail something over the phone and then say I'll follow that up with an email detailing everything that we've discussed. And at that point, you make it auto reply that they have to reply to it. They have to check a box to reply or to read it, and you know that they've read it. And at that point, you actually have a paper trail, and it's kind of rough to do that. It's kind of harsh. But when you've been through the situation of people not paying you for your services, one situation that I was in was when I was just starting out. I'd been probably about 8 months into the unemployment, 8, 9 months. And I went out in Maine and did a gig in New Hampshire. And granted, this was like February. And I don't know if you're familiar with the weather up there up around February, but it's feet of snow. So I drove an hour or so across state lines to go do a show, did a show, went off great. Band got a live recording like I always provided. Came back, didn't get paid. Kept after the guy. And, at this point, you really do have to start creating a paper trail. You start having to leave breadcrumbs. You can't delete cell phone conversations or cell logs. Collect all your cell phone logs from the point that if you can go on and print them, actually go on and print them from the point of initial contact to the point of present contact where you're trying to contact them, and highlight all of the contacts. Like, look, I've tried to contact this guy 2-3 times a day. Because if it does come down to small claims court, if it does come to that, that's out of your pocket. And if you have representation, that's great. Most of us freelancers don't. So it's really the point of we have to do what we can do to assure the fact that we're getting paid out of the gate. And that's a lot of why, DJs, different companies, even different individuals require basically a reservation fee. We require a deposit that's non-refundable for the services to lock down dates. That way, if dates are canceled, hey man, sometimes shows canceled because of weather. Sometimes it's canceled because, so-and-so can't be there, what have you. But that doesn't mean that we should lose our time for reserving that. Because we've reserved that time, and once we've done that, that means we are saying no to other work during that time. So, number one, there's a 3-letter acronym, CYA, cover your arse, to put it nicely. And it's literally the fact of, from the get-go, you need to be keeping track of every communication. You need to be making sure that everything is clear, understood, between yourself and your client. You need to have contracts, especially if you're dealing with things over a couple $100. Once I get up over $250, we're going to be talking a contract to reserve services. We're going to be talking about, getting invoices done, getting things submitted, finding out if it's 30 days to pay. Not all gigs that you show up to, especially most corporate gigs, are not, hey, here's your check when you show up, like a wedding DJ, or a photographer or an event videographer whenever you show up. It's the fact that you're going to have to keep track of that. You're going to have to keep up with that. And you have to show, when you get to court, a legalese term called due diligence. And that's the fact that you have gone through every effort. You have tried mail. You have tried email. You have tried text. You have tried phone. You have tried office phone. You've tried cell phone. That you have tried every means possible through which to connect with this person and get the payment that you are due. Now, remember, whenever you do go to court, whenever that does happen, your fees, anything incurred with collection of that, can be rolled into that cost. So, if you had to pay like I did in Maine, if you have to pay to serve the person via the sheriff and say, here is your court documentation saying that you owe this person money, then that's what has to happen, and that has to come out of your pocket. And, of course, because that person would not contact you, you have to make sure that they understand that you have to be paid for your services. A lot of people, and I've been a part of business dealings where, man, it was like $1,000 that somebody owed us, and we didn't chase after him. We didn't go after him, and we should have. Ended up that the guy in Louisiana that we were involved with had done this to numerous people, professional people, all kinds of stuff. And, owed money all across the board to all sorts of people. So it's literally the fact of, at that point, you really do have to make the stand, if anything, to set the precedent and to let it be known. This stuff, I mean, the guy that I sued in Maine came back 2 years later and was like, hey, buddy, is there any way you can contact my creditors? This is popping up on my credit report, and I can't get loans for business. And I'm like, well, I told you that would be a foregone circumstance, that, if you don't pay people, it tends to show up on your credit, that, you had a judgment levied against you in court for non-payment of services rendered. And it's kind of what you have to do to make sure that, those things get registered, especially with the internet nowadays, Yelp, all that kind of stuff. There can be some real far-reaching consequences to this kind of thing. And it can really get out there that people don't pay. Now, you don't want to be nasty. You don't want to get to the point where you're defaming anybody's character, where you're calling them out in public or on Facebook. Those are not professional moves. I've seen that as well, where people hop onto Facebook and start talking about, like, so-and-so shafted me on my gig. They were supposed to pay me this much. Forget so-and-so. I'm never going to work for them again. It's like, I understand the sentiment. Believe me, I've been there. But that gets to the point of, if it does go to court, if anything does happen, now there's record of you bad-mouthing them in public. And once you put it in print, that's called libel. Other than that, it's called slander whenever you're just doing it. And if people can show that it causes them harm in business, that it causes them detriment to business, that it has affected their income, buddy, you can be held just as liable. So you really have to watch it in this day and age with how you go about handling this situation. Now, I said before, the best thing to do is start with a paper trail. Start off with stuff like your emails, invoices, follow-up invoices. Make sure to put on your invoices that payment is due within 30 days or within, 2 days, or detail all of that stuff out in the contract or on your invoice. That payment is due in this amount of time, or else, extra payment is incurred. Extra fees are incurred if that's not the case. So, a lot of it is setting up the infrastructure to begin with, and really, until you've been burned, you don't think about it. You really don't think about it, because until then, everything's been gentleman's handshake, which, hey, a handshake is just as liable in most courts of law in the states. A handshake deal is an agreement between two parties. Should it be in writing? Yes, yes, yes. Put it in writing. By all means, put it in writing. But at the same token, especially if you're used to doing business with someone, if you have a previous relationship and you have a previous understanding that can stand up. But the main thing is, don't let yourself be bullied. Don't let yourself be, taken aside by this. And please, please don't think that you're the only one. Like I said, I have had churches that have not paid me. Churches. And that's hard to believe, ladies and gentlemen. That's very, very hard to believe whenever you're talking about, people who work for God. A real good way to tell is if pastor's driving a better car than their most prestigious not clergy member, but, congregation member. That's normally a really good telltale sign. If they aren't too down to earth. But even then, it's business. It's business. It's nothing personal. It's nothing personal. And, a plumber coming in would bring a contract. Why would the sound guy not bring a contract? So you have to remember that it is for your own protection. It's for your own well-being. It's for your own professionalism. And when people see these things, they know immediately. It's an immediate sign that they're dealing with someone that's not just a fly-by-night, not someone that does this for a hobby. It's professional. And you can hop online, go onto Google, and you can look up an invoice. There are plenty of general forms out there that you can get for contracting invoices, things like that, change wording. My recommendation is find yourself an entertainment lawyer. Most lawyers will write a contract for a flat fee, couple $100, and it seems like it's a large outlay, but man, whenever it comes down to it, whenever it comes down to that happening, whenever it comes down to that circumstance, it's worth the $200 to have that legal documentation. It's worth the $200 to have a piece of paper that has the legalese on it that covers yourself. And, if you have to, explain it to your client that this is not only for my protection, but yours as well. Contracts protect people on both sides of them, not just one, at least a good contract. So that's the main thing to remember, is that it's being done as a point of professionalism and that you're doing it as a means by which to protect yourself. Now, you don't have to be bullyish. You don't, things can get heated rapidly when it comes to it. I recently had a situation where, a gentleman was actually just like an hour or so late meeting me. And, I'd gone out of my way. I've never worked with the guy before. He was kind enough to get me a check for covering the gig for him rapidly. So that was nice. But it was a little inconvenient to have to drive one way to go meet somebody, then wait 30, 40 minutes. And come to find out, hey man, we've all been there. Just recently in the last episode, I talked about how tired I was. And for 3 days, it was like someone had just chopped me at the knees, man. I could barely crawl, much less move. And here this guy was after, a good 72 hours and a few days, driving out to meet me with check in hand. And, paths just crossed. He didn't have his phone with him. I was texting him. I was calling him. Hey, man, where you at? What's up? He was there. I was there. We'd never seen each other's cars or faces. We'd never shook hands. So he ended up coming and meeting me with the check, and it was great, and all is mended, all is well. But, there's that moment of initial panic, especially whenever you've been through it before of, oh, sweet baby Jesus. Oh, sweet baby Jesus, what am I in for here? What's going on? And it really comes down to clear lines of communication, talking with people, keeping pathways open, and, protecting yourself. Really, really protecting yourself. Even whenever you get married, it's a contract. There's a social contract that happens. There's legal documentation. And that's something that's done out of love, a bond between man and wife, man and husband, man and whomever, that, is indelible by the Creator. But at the same time, you got to have some kind of legal documentation for it. So as much as you love yourself, love your career, love protecting it. It really is the fact that the only person that's going to look out for you and your best interests is you. That doesn't mean that you have to be, a hard shell about it. It doesn't mean that you have to use harsh words. It doesn't mean that you have to use bullying tactics. But it means be careful who you do business with. Be careful who you're dealing with. And I'd like to thank the listener very much who brought up the question online and mentioned that in one of the page comments. It was great. And it is something that's worrisome whenever it happens to you. So there's a little bit of advice for you moving on in the future. From this point forward, I would say, really start keeping a record. Whenever you call them, like literally go out, spend yourself a good $1 on a small spiral bound notebook and just start documenting, man. Just start documenting every single day. Start a spreadsheet. Whenever you call them, whenever you contact them, on this date, on this time, I contacted them on this number, or I sent them an email, and print those emails. Whenever you're done with them, print them out with the date of send, everything else on them, and start. It'll drop their jaw whenever you walk in to a small claims court, and you've got all of that. My big recommendation is, especially those who are self-employed, I actually got addicted to them for a while, but judge shows like, divorce, or not necessarily divorce court, but little dirty secret there. Chris likes divorce court. Boom, boom. But people's court, Judge Joe Brown, all that kind of stuff, it's frequent. If you watch those shows, it's frequent that it's a photographer from a wedding, a videographer from a wedding, a caterer from a wedding, a DJ or a band suing management, or, a band suing studios for not giving them their product on time, all kinds of stuff. You will learn so much about protecting yourself as a professional. I can't even explain it, because literally, like I said, until you get to the point that you have representation, that you have a lawyer, that you have on retainer, that you pay to cover your butt every single day, until you get to there, it's on you. You're the one that has to cover it. You're the one that has to watch it. So you really do have to have contracts in line. You really do, and just make it a point of fact. Hey, who do I send this contract to? Do you have a manager that I send it to? Do I send it directly to your email? What's going on? And you'd be surprised how rapidly the attitudes shift, how rapidly those things change, and how the paradigm just flip-flops on itself. And people, like I said before, the day I got business cards and started handing them out to people, I stopped. I would have a beer or two maybe at a gig over 5 or 6 hours, but I stopped drinking for free at shows. I stopped, taking advantage of that rule, and even getting drunk in clubs and venues. Like I'll go to a bar if I want to have a few drinks with somebody or something like that, but I'm never going to get soused there, because next thing I know, I may be trying to do business, and the last thing that I want is the bar owner or the bartender going, "Oh, that guy." So just a few tidbits on protecting yourself and protecting your investment and protecting a lot of things. We'll get into it later on. I'll try and actually contact an entertainment lawyer or something like that, see if we can't get them on, and talk about the process of becoming an LLC or an S Corp, or a doing business as, and what the pluses and minuses are of all three, and how you get legal protection the higher you go, and what the necessities are to do so. Because that's really a big part of this industry as well. A lot of times, you're going to, places won't even touch you if you're a DBA, because it's hard for you to get bonding insurance, so there's a lot of intricacies, that can go on whenever you're dealing with the legalities of putting on shows. So on that note, everybody, please stop on by the website, www.talkingsoundshow.com. There, you can find all of the articles, videos, episodes of the podcast in audio and video format. There are technical videos there that give you tips and tricks. We're getting ready to make a few more of those. In addition to that, over on the right-hand side is a brand new widget where you can actually call us and leave us technical questions or feedback about the show. We would, and just like this listener, we will use your comments to create content. So we will actually answer your questions in episodes. It's fantastic. It's a great idea. I actually picked up the concept from another podcast that I listen to called Ask Pat. For those of you who listen to podcasts and design web or want to start small businesses, anything like that, I highly recommend him. Ask Pat. You can find him anywhere. In addition to that, everybody, please stop off and visit us on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Talking Sound. There you can find all of our fundraisers. You can help give to the cause, help better the show. We've already had people who've donated and helped us upgrade to an HD package here for capture cards as well as the home studio as well. So that's fantastic. It's awesome. Thank you so much to Patreon and everyone who's given on that cause. And on that note, everybody, thank you so much for all of your support, listening, tuning in, watching everything on YouTube. We thank you so much. And without you guys, we would have no show. On that note, I am Chris Jordan, your host. And until next time, everybody, keep reaching for 11. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
This is Talking Sound.